Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats so that we could resume the session.
We are about 20 minutes behind.
Okay, welcome back. I would like to start off by extending a gratitude to the last panel for that lively and rich discussion. So we're going to now start the session on case studies and perspectives on financing mitigation in industry. This session is basically going to showcase real examples and case studies of mitigation actions where public finance, blended mechanisms, and support from global funds have successfully improved bankability and accelerated development. The examples that will be presented include those implemented through collaborative efforts between financial institutions and countries. And each country and case study will either be jointly presented by key investment partners and their host country, or by presenters who will share concrete examples of innovative approaches, innovative investment approaches, enabling frameworks, and key lessons learned in advancing mitigation action in industries. To moderate this session, we're pleased to invite on stage Samira Hachman, the Climate Policy Advisor from GIZ. Thank you very much, Samira, for offering to moderate. And I will now pass over to her so she can invite the case study presenters.
Okay, so.
Is going to be here for the presenter.
Okay. Thank you very much, esteemed co-chairs. And I have the pleasure now to moderate this next session. My name is Samira Hachman. I'm a climate policy advisor for the GIZ. And as it was announced, we now have 6 case studies, 6 real-world examples. And I will ask colleagues to join me here on stage one by one. And different to the session we had before, after each presentation, each input, you will have the chance to ask your questions. So listen in and make use of having your fellow experts present here. And without further ado, I'm welcoming Ms. Hyun-Kong Kim, Executive Director for the Korea Institute of Energy Technology Evaluation and Planning. Please join me on stage, and a warm welcome for her.
Good afternoon. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Hyun-Kyung Kim, and I serve as an Executive Director at Korea Institute of Energy Technology Evaluation and Planning. It's called KATEP, which is a primary government agency responsible for planning and managing Korea's energy technology R&D investments. Today, I'd like to share Korea's strategic experience in scaling industrial decarbonization technologies through public R&D investments. Today, Korea's industrial sector accounts for roughly 36% of national greenhouse gas emissions, the largest single emitting sector when indirect emissions are included. The structural change is formidable. We are a trade-exposed, manufacturing-intensive economy with deep dependency on steel, petrochemicals, and cement, 3 of the hardest to abate industries anywhere in the world. In the past, our approach was characterized by single ministry initiatives and rigid R&D timelines. To meet our 2050 goals, we transitioned the Korean model. This model thrives on pan-governmental collaboration and a targeted selection of 100 core technologies. Specifically, in the industrial sector, we identified 44 core technologies across high-emitting industries such as steel, petrochemicals, and cement. Our roadmaps are designed to link fundamental R&D directly to commercial scale-up. Within the industrial sector, our technology investments are organized around 3 priority clusters, all targeting decarbonization. First, equipment transition. We're pursuing carbon-free combustion and replacing conventional refrigerant with natural alternatives. And second, energy efficiency. This involves the electrification of fossil fuel-based hydraulic and pneumatic systems, aiming for a 90% component efficiency for electrified drives. And third, clean processes. In the semiconductor and display sectors, we are substituting high global warming potential process gases with alternatives that have a GWP of less than 150. Now let me move on to the most significant single investment in our industrial decarbonization program, the HYREX project, Korea's hydrogen reduction ion making initiative. We are replacing coking coal with green hydrogen in the ion making process, producing direct reduction ion through fluorized bed reactors. This eliminates the single largest source of CO2 in steel production. Total project investment is 814.5 billion Korean won, approximately 580 billion US dollars over a 25-year horizon to 2050. Of that, public funding accounts for 308.8 billion won, focused entirely on the early stage, high-risk phases where private capital will not go without a credible proof of concept. Private capital commits 505.7 billion won, but only because the government has already de-risked the fundamental engineering. The phasing is deliberate. Phase 1, running to 2025, covered process design and engineering fundamentals. Phase 2 to 2030 constructs and verifies a 1 million ton demonstration facility. And Phase 3 to 2040 scales to a 3 million ton commercial plant. And Phase 4 to 2050 is entirely privately led phase transition of all domestic blast furnaces. Beyond steel, let me briefly highlight our approach in petrochemicals and cement. In the petrochemical sector, our strategy centers on raw material substitution and circular resource utilization. We're developing bio-naphtha and bio-olefin feedstocks to replace conventional petroleum-derived inputs and investing in chemical recycling technologies, specifically solvent extraction. Our roadmap targets pilot scale by 2029, with commercial transition beginning in the early 2030s. In the cement sector, the focus is on non-carbonate raw material substitution. Our technology roadmap replaces limestone with slag and waste concrete, eliminating the embedded CO2 at source. We are also substituting bituminous coal with combustor waste-derived synthetic resins as fuel. Our target is a 65% or greater substitution rate for fuels, with step-by-step expansion across Korea's 44 domestic cement kilns. Both of these sectors illustrate a critical point. The investment pipeline in hard-to-abate industries requires public R&D to solve problems that have no existing commercial solutions before private capital can be expected to deploy at scale. Crossing the valley of death between a proven technology and commercial deployment requires a second layer of government intervention, financial de-risking. Korea's primary fiscal instrument is the designation of carbon-neutral technologies as new growth and core technologies within our national tax code. The designation unlocks preferential R&D tax deductions of up to 30% for small and medium enterprises and up to 20% for large firms. As of today, 54 specific carbon neutral technologies qualify for this designation, covering CCUS, hydrogen, industrial processes, and energy efficiency. Facility investments are also eligible, with base deductions of up to 10% for SMEs, coupled with accelerated deductions for incremental investment increases. The mechanisms aims to realign corporate R&D incentives, enabling investment in carbon neutral technologies to be financially viable even prior to achieving cost parity with incumbent fossil-based processes. The third instrument is direct public financing, and this is where we have the clearest evidence of investment pipeline effects. Korea's net zero leading project loans programs provide long-term, low-interest loans and interest rate subsidies for both R&D and facility investments across all industrial sectors. These are not grants. They are loans structured to reduce the cost of capital for long-horizon, capital-intensive projects that commercial banks are most reluctant to finance. The results over 3 years are concrete. As of 2025, the program has supported 70 advanced industrial decarbonization projects, allocating 502 billion Korean won in government support. And critically, the government lending has catalyzed 2.3 trillion won in private capital mobilization. That is private leverage ratio of approximately 4.6 to 1. Let me close with what I believe are the 3 transferable lessons from Korea's experience. The first is technology push. Government must act as a mission setter and a co-investor in the engineering risk, not just a passive grant maker. Mission-oriented public R&D organized around clean technological targets and sector roadmaps is what creates the foundation on which private investment can build. And the second is capital pool. Tax credits and concessionary loans are not subsidies for mature industries. They are precision instruments for de-risking the balance sheet during the critical transition from demonstration to commercial scale, the exact phase where private capital most frequently fails to appear. And the third is market signal. None of this works substantially without a credible carbon price. The emission trading scheme must be tightened to absorb the oversupplied credits, ensuring carbon prices actively incentivize early adoption of green technologies. Scaling industrial decarbonization is not just an engineering challenge. It requires a tightly interlocked policy triad, precise R&D targeting, aggressive financial pipelines, and robust carbon pricing. Korea is still building this triad, but the architecture is clear and the early results are encouraging. I hope Korea's case has offered some insights for your work, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Hyung-kyung. One round of applause. And now you're all invited to ask questions. We will have time for 2 to 3 questions, so please find your way to the microphones. Giving everyone maybe a minute to formulate something. Well, I would have a question to start it off. You opened the picture of the valley of death from research and development to commercial deployment, and you showed some examples of how Korea is approaching this. And what advice would you give to a country that is not as far ahead as you are? They're maybe starting off. What would be sort of your advice reflecting on the process, where to start?
Value of to deploy the clean technologies in the world is very, it requires a lot of energy and a lot of budget. So I think one of the effective solution is maybe international collaboration on some of the projects that maybe countries have mutual interest in. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Do we have any more questions from the audience? If there are none, thank you very much for sharing your case. Please, another round of applause, and then we proceed to the next speaker, who will join us virtually, Ms. Karen Westman, Head of Sustainability and Country Analysis at the Swedish Export Credit Agency. And I hope the connection is working. I see you on screen already. Can you hear us?
Perfect. I can hear you very well, thank you.
Perfect. We hear you very well as well. So please, over to you.
Thank you so much. So you can move to the next slide, please. So good afternoon from Stockholm. I'm very excited to join you and listening in on this fruitful conversation so far. And I think my colleague from Korea has painted a perfect picture of how to start use the de-risking industrial decarbonization. And what I will complement that picture with is from an export credit agency perspective. Export credit agencies have been around for a long time, and we are one of the tools in the toolbox that we can use collectively to de-risk and make sure that funding and finance is available for industrial decarbonization. I will speak very hands-on. We talk to our customers and our clients, so that would be exporters from Sweden, it would be their clients in many countries around the world on a daily basis. So we're very much hands-on, so we will try to keep it hands-on as well. Next slide, please. So just to start off with who we are, so the Swedish Export Credit Agency has been around for a long time, closing in on 100 years soon, and that's the same in many other countries. So what I will speak about is not specific for Sweden. You can actually take it back to most countries have an export credit agency or Exim Bank. Some are old, as we are, but some are also new, and we have a very strong collaboration within this field. As an industry, it's estimated that we support around numbers and figures, right? But 182 billion US dollars for medium and long-term export and trade-related support a couple of years ago. And we just see the demand for our types of solution and guarantees increasing. The organization I represent, we offer guarantees. So again, I know that most of you in the room already know this, but when you hear the word guarantee, you should think insurance. So we insure payments and financing for both trade transactions and projects. And we are active in around 130 countries in the world, and we have the same rating as the Kingdom of Sweden. So that's a AAA rating, which means that every time you use our insurance, your financial risk is a risk on the Kingdom of Sweden and not on your client. Next slide, please. This is the simple version of how it works. And again, many of you in the room will know this, but just to show a very simple version of what we do. So the buyer, and I think here we can think either of, it could be a private company that is looking to de-risk its investment in industrial decarbonization. We could look at a country that is supporting, as we heard in the previous example, some early phases of a new type of project. Or it can be a private and public partnership of different kinds. Thinking that you want to complement your other types of sources of funding with a loan from a commercial bank. You want to make sure that it fits within the national debt limits, and using a AAA rated guarantee from somebody like us makes sure that you decrease the risk for the bank, and the terms that is offered are then more affordable and easier to approve. From the commercial bank's perspective, who's really the key player also here, want to arrange the financing, but obviously they need certainty. We can provide tenors up to in some cases, 22 years. And obviously, that's not possible to do purely as a commercial bank. But when you have an export credit agency or several in the background, you are able to, as a commercial bank, to be able to offer these kind of solutions. Obviously, there needs to be some sort of export involved in this. This is the very, very, very basic version of this. As an EKN or an export credit agency, we can also come in this very simplified version of supporting the exporter when they are selling their goods to the industrial project, de-risking their sales. But we can also, when the exporter, their clients, in this case the project, when they're saying, oh, we want to buy this, this, and this to make sure that we can move ahead with our industrial decarbonization, it may require additional investments in the exporter's own industry, in their own factories. And we can then also de-risk that investment from a commercial bank. Now, we are very simple people. So we look at these kind of funding and we're like, okay, so here we go. We are part of this project. And then we just work very hands-on with commercials, with our clients and so on. But when we take a step back, we always, obviously, it's always complemented with either type of funding or financial sources from private or public sources. And I think that this is where the analogy of the toolbox becomes so important. It's not either this tool or that tool that's important, but we are all, everything I've heard so far, are examples of tools that are either used in the same project, maybe in a different timeline, or alternatively as providing the backbone. For example, it could be multilateral funding that is supporting an overarching framework that enables and facilitates this kind of investment or something else. So we have all of these private and public sources, but what we find as export credit agencies is that sometimes it's unknown that we are there in the background, de-risking the project and taking basically the ultimate financial risk. Next slide, please. So what it makes possible, this would then be no surprise for you, but for the buyer, the benefits are very straightforward and extremely powerful. So using an export credit guarantee enables mobilization of private capital at scale, as we saw in terms of the industrial outreach that we have. We can provide long-term and stable financing as the Kingdom of Sweden. We will not back down from our commitments, but on commercial terms. And I think that, again, this is important. We have different tools in the financial toolbox, and this is enables us to, and our clients, obviously, to receive funding and financing on commercial terms. We reduce the political and financial risk, and as a buyer, you can choose this option to diversify your loan portfolio, and also, in that case, reducing the use of your bank's credit limits, very hands-on. It makes more funding available for you. And not the least, when we do this, this is underpinned by robust environmental and social requirements. And I think there are, in this transition that we are collectively doing, there will be situations where we will have conflicting interests. But for us, it's very important that it's always a robust environmental and social requirements. And that also means that if an export credit like ourselves is involved in a project, it's been through a robust due diligence process, not only on the financial and commercial aspects, but also environmental and social requirements. Next slide, please. So under which conditions is it most effective for industrial decarbonization? We already heard this, and I was very glad to hear the previous speaker. So for us, if it's proven but capital intensive technologies with long back periods, that's where our real strength comes in. But we can also work with small and large investments. And I think sort of ticket size is not necessarily a problem for us. It could be a problem for the commercial bank, but not for us. And it's very important not to forget the small and mid-sized companies. We need large new industrial investments, but we also need a lot of small and large investments in existing operations, and we can come in there. But the sort of challenges for us is related to policy. So we have here policy, carbon pricing, and green demand. Carbon pricing and green demand are also policy. And again, I think it was very well articulated on how a country like Korea can work to strategically mitigate those policy risks. Next slide, please. So just to give two examples, and now you are wondering, okay, so industrial decarbonizations, and we are now looking at buses and again, steel, I think for the same reasons that we have before. But I think this highlights the fact that industrial decarbonization is everything. So if we look at the bus, one example of a project that we are guaranteeing is a bus rapid transit, BRT, system in Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire, and I'm sure that there is probably a colleague in the room who knows more about this. So again, our guarantee provides the opportunity for commercial funding to go in and fund part of a BRT system with high technology buses that can be run on different types of fuels. That has an add-on of now exploring how to build a biofuel industry that could supply the buses with biofuels that you could run the buses on, in addition to other types of ticketing services and so on. We are part of one piece of the project, but there's an MDB in the background who's done a lot of work of sort of supporting the overarching plan for these projects and also funding other parts of the project. This is a prerequisite for other types of industrial decarbonization. So for example, the exporter in this case, they need then to decarbonize their entire value chain and their systems and so on. So in raising the demand for the products that we need, and also in providing good financial opportunities. This is one example of what we can do. And as I said, we are active in 133 countries, large and small. Anything works basically, so we could do that. The second example is on a green steel project in northern Sweden. How is that related to export? Well, the steel will be exported, but I want to use this to highlight that we are involved guaranteeing the financing for a water project that's related to this green steel investment. But a lot of the industrial decarbonization projects that are happening in Sweden and in Europe at the moment are, in fact, when you open the box, underpinned by an export credit guarantee from one of our colleagues in other countries. So it may, at the surface, I just want to highlight to you who are representing countries, go back and have a chat with your export credit agency and see what they are doing. We are still, to some extent, unknown. We are, I think, underutilized, and we are used to handling these kind of projects. This is what we do every day, and we are very hands-on and have our ear to the ground together with our customers. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Karen. Please, a round of applause for her. Can we get Karen back on screen, maybe? I hope you're still with us, because now we have time for questions. Very interesting presentation. Thanks a lot. So, giving the audience a minute to reflect. And you actually, with your last words, prompted a question on my side. You said export credit agencies are still unknown and underutilized. What would you say, if a country is now reflecting on your presentation, how would they approach an agency like yours, or how would they approach you?
So I would say that they sometimes we are a specific agency, but sometimes it's part of a department in the government. So you call them up, I would say, is the very simple answer. You also make sure that the policy conditions for your export credit agencies are the right ones to enable a strong focus on energy transition, on industrial decarbonization. So a few of us have, since many years now, had a phase-out policy for support of fossil fuels, for example. And we have a net zero alliance for export credit agencies, where a number of us are working together to make sure that we have a level playing field between how we support our customers. And we are very well placed to support transition. Yes, we can obviously do green and all of that. And there's also others who can do that. And our job is to complement when the private market does not want to take risk anymore. And we do have some blended finance instruments. We work with our colleagues at multinational development banks and DFIs and so on. But there's a lot more that we can do when we are more aware of what we do together. But again, I think that the specific benefits of our industry is that we are very, very hands-on, and we talk to the companies on a daily basis. So I think that that's where we can play a specific role, also in sort of a temperature check on what's needed.
Thanks a lot for sharing these insights. Here in the room, no one has made their way to the microphone. So if there are no last questions, then I would say thank you very much for your time and for joining us virtually. And yeah, another round of applause for Karen Westman.
Thank you.
And now we turn to our next case study on support by the Global Environmental Facility for Industrial Mitigation Actions. And we have two speakers. Virtually, I welcome Rémi Rua, Climate Change Specialist at the GEF Secretariat. And here in the room with us, we have Christopher Hope, Industrial Transition Specialist at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. So, a round of applause. I hope, Rémi, you can hear us and that we can see you in a second on our screen.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we see you and hear you perfectly. So over to you as you will be starting.
Perfect. I hope you can see my slides. I'll wait for confirmation.
We cannot see them yet, but switching now. So I think we can go to the next slide. Yes.
Perfect. So thank you very much for having me today, and my apologies for my voice. It's middle of the night in DC, but I'm very happy to be with you virtually today. I'm going to present very briefly the way the GEF works and how funds are accessed with a specific focus on climate change mitigation in industries. Next slide, please. So this is a QR code in case you want to access the GEF website. All the information that I'm going to present to you today is available publicly on that website. Just a few notes before I go to the details. The GEF was established as a financial mechanism to support developing countries to address globally important environmental challenges, and that was done before the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. And so those challenges include climate change, but also more broadly biodiversity loss, land degradation, as well as chemicals and waste-related pollution. I'm specifying this because today the GEF is not just one fund, it's a family of funds dedicated to interrelated priorities for people and the planet, and it serves 6 conventions. So the UNFCCC, of course, but also the CBD, the CCD, so biodiversity and land degradation, and also the Minamata and Stockholm Convention, as well as the BBNG agreement more recently. Due to this, our funding is dedicated to specific priorities, including climate change, but we also support programmatic efforts in an integrated way through approaches that combine priorities of different conventions that we serve. The next slide, please. So on this slide, I just wanted to introduce you to the main stakeholders involved in the GEF governance and in the project cycle of the GEF. So we have 186 member countries. The GEF Council is the main decision-making body. The council meets about twice a year, and it's consisted of 32 constituency groups. So our projects and programs are approved by the council, but they are also supported by the GEF Secretariat. So I am a member of the Secretariat. We are based in Washington, DC. We work closely with our independent evaluation office, as well as the scientific and technical advisory panel, who reviews each project's design and provides advice. We also have support from the trustee, which is part of the World Bank Group and manages our funding. At the country level, our main contact points are GEF operational and political focal points. Those can be embedded in various ministries, be it environment, finance, or others. And they are our main point of contact in connection with GEF operations. We also have political focal points who ensure the connection with national priorities. We have also very important stakeholders such as conventional focal points, as well as civil society, indigenous peoples, and private sector stakeholders that are very important in GEF operations. So the way funds are accessed is that countries select any agency of their choice among the 18 GEF agencies that are accredited to submit funding requests. And they engage with local civil society organization, private sector, academia, and local communities to design, implement, and execute GEF projects. That part, execution, I would like to make a distinction, which is important in our system. We also have a different stakeholder to the GEF agencies, which are the executing entities or executing partners. And these actors are really the one managing the projects on the ground. They can be private sector, they can be ministries, they can be agencies, any type of actor really that is involved in project financing. Next slide, please. So on the next slide, this is just a summary of the 18 current GEF agencies that are able to access funding on behalf of the countries. We have a mix of UN organizations, multilateral development banks, also some national development banks, as well as NGOs. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I just wanted to give you an overview of our climate change mitigation related support since our inception in 1991. All of this information is available in our GEF report to the COP, which we produce every year. So as of last year, in the last report to the COP that we prepared, the GEF had already provided over $8.8 billion in grant financing. Noting that grant financing is really where we specialize. We are focusing on highly risky projects, and we support those with grant investment as well as technical assistance in the large majority of cases. We also provide non-grant instruments, and I will go over that in a moment. We have supported more than 1,464 climate change mitigation focused projects in about 155 countries, and leverage even more funding in the amounts of $68 billion. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you an overview of the different entry points that are eligible for funding in the current GEF cycle. We work in cycles of 4 years of replenishment. And so our investment criteria evolve every 4 years with the replenishments, but they always remain around these 4 key pillars. The objective is always to support developing countries to make shifts towards net zero GHG emissions and climate resilient development pathways. There are 4 main entry points in this strategy on energy and material efficiency, decarbonized power systems, zero emission mobility scale up, and nature-based solutions. So the topic of today, industrial decarbonization, is one that can be found in mainly the 3 first entry points. So at the GEF, this includes measures on energy efficiency in industrial processes, accompanied by electrification, but also material efficiency and circularity, especially in the building sector supply chains, such as for cement, as well as feedstock and material substitution, also in that sector. And also importantly, the use of green hydrogen produced with renewables for hard-to-abate applications. So this includes, for example, fertilizer and chemicals industries. Next slide, please. So I'm going to spend a bit more time on this one. I wanted to give you a few examples of recent GEF support to climate change mitigation in industries. And these priorities are supported through a variety of modalities, but this can be either at a project level in a country, or it can be across multiple countries, and we call those programmatic approaches or global programs. So the first 3 examples on this list are examples of such global programs. They focus on various segments of industrial decarbonization. So the first one is more to support the economic tissue at local level to accelerate innovation from MSMEs and startups. The second one is more to support the development of green hydrogen for hard-to-abate applications. And the third one is to support net zero transition pathways in a nature positive ways. And this, for example, entails working across industrial supply chains through promoting green procurement practices. So most of the time, those are technical assistance related investments along with some grant investment support. But in some cases, these are also part of broader long-term programmatic efforts in specific countries. One example of this country is South Africa. I'm going to give an example on this, where industry decarbonization related funding has been unlocked over the last GEF cycle in line with the investment roadmap that had been laid out by the country on just energy transition. And this really made the design of just investments in the country more coherent, and it made it much easier also to prepare the funding in a streamlined way, as all the needs assessment part of the project design had been prepared already by South African partners when they prepared the investment plan, including with support from one of our sister multilateral climate fund, the Climate Investment Funds, who support investment planning in a variety of countries. And this helps us then to come in with technical assistance to cover specific needs that have been identified in these plans. So we also recently launched a global level accelerator to further articulate our financing on industry decarbonization with investment programs of the states in a variety of countries. So that's the fourth element on this slide. My colleague Christopher Hope from UNIDO is going to be sharing a few examples on this aspect just after me, but I already wanted to give you an example in this country, in South Africa, of a blended finance investments developed by our partners from the Development Bank of Southern Africa, DBSA, and which is actually quite similar to the example we heard just before. So it's composed of a mix of credit guarantee along with technical assistance for pipeline development activities, and it targets especially small and medium-sized enterprises in the country in the manufacturing and industrial applications. So this is a case where local financial institutions, so mainly commercial banks, are being leveraged to extend loan financing thanks to a de-risking mechanism through a credit guarantee. And then these loans are covering energy efficiency applications in various manufacturing and industrial segments with the support of this highly concessional credit guarantee facility that is co-financed with GEF funding that is taking a junior position to really increase the risk that we are able to take along with co-financing from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. So across the spectrum of GEF investments, we can support industrial decarbonization through grant mechanism, but also technical assistance as well as blended finance mechanisms. And we are trying to ramp up in our next cycle this type of investments. Next slide, please. So all the information providing today is available on our report to the COP, which is prepared every year. It is usually published ahead of the COP and transmitted through the UNFCCC Secretariat via the Standing Committee on Finance, but you can also find it on our website and I put the link there. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, the GEF is concluding in the next couple of months. It's a GEF 8 programming cycle. So this was our 8th replenishment. We are just concluding the preparation of our GEF 9th replenishment, which will start in July this year. And so for any information on the details of eligibility criteria for funding on climate change mitigation, including on industry, this is outlined in our programming direction. So this is the main document where the details that I presented before about which type of segments are covered, and usually this is most of the segments, this is presented in this document. As I said, compared to the previous cycle that I presented, there are no major changes. Those are still main priorities for us. And we also have summaries and links available on our dedicated webpage on the GEF website in case you would like to take a look at our flagship projects, or if you have any question, you can also reach out to us. So I will stop here for now, and I will let my colleague Christopher from UNIDO take this discussion a step further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Remy. Let me just dive straight in then to continue the flow. A reminder, my name is Christopher Hope, and I work for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, I know there's a few of you, but just to recap, so the United Nations Industrial Development Organization is the part of the UN system that is mandated for the promotion of inclusive and sustainable industrial development. So it's within that context that we serve as one of the implementing agencies for the GEF and focusing on many of the industrial decarbonisation projects that Remy has just mentioned or alluded to at least. So what I wanted to do, and I appreciate that it's late in the day and it's quite a hot room, so I won't speak for very long. And what I am hoping to do is just give some illustrative examples of how that climate finance, in this case from the GEF, comes down to actual projects where we as UNIDO look to support countries with the development of their industrial decarbonisation or green industrialisation objectives. And I think it builds on the previous session where we spoke about the deployment of capital and what that looks like in practice at this stage, as the panelists noted, where it's early in this particular type of financing. And I think this is relevant for climate negotiators, of course, in the context of the work that you do unlocking a lot of this finance. So I'm going to give two examples of ongoing or recently initiated projects in South Africa that UNIDO are leading, and then one which is a global initiative. So the two in South Africa are an example of what this looks like in practice on the ground. So in the South African context, the work that we're doing in collaboration with the GEF is oriented around South Africa's own stated just energy transition ambitions. So they launched, South Africa, a just energy transition partnership in 2021, and this was targeting an investment or over $11 billion in financing. From that, they developed later, in collaboration with colleagues including the World Bank and the IFC, a just energy transition investment plan in 2023. And here South Africa laid out really their vision for their role within the energy transition, but particularly that just element to it. So thinking a lot about the treatment of local communities, and certainly the opportunity to create jobs, to create long-term industrial growth paths within this energy transition. And it was within that national context then that the work of the GEF and UNIDO was situated. So we came in, and there are two projects that are recently underway. The first, which I'll describe, is with regards to hydrogen, green hydrogen. So the program was mentioned by Remy, in fact, the Global Green Hydrogen Program. South Africa are one of the 9 countries that are involved in that program, and China are also involved in a sister project at least. I won't describe that overall aim as Remy has laid it out, but effectively how can you drive investment, pipeline development in green hydrogen in these different contexts. And in South Africa, the project is a $1 million GEF project with $15 million in co-financing. And what the project is doing, and this is initiated as of the last six months or so, is looking at the development of special economic zones. So it's focusing on 2 industrial clusters for the time being, thinking about how you design those investment structures, and working, as has been mentioned previously, on ensuring that hydrogen standards are designed in an effective way. There's then work within this on strengthening the technical readiness for hydrogen production. So that means conducting infrastructure assessments and working out or prioritizing where new industrial opportunities exist within the hydrogen pipeline and targeting your attention there. And then from there, there's a dedicated financing component within the program, which includes, of course, the development of a hydrogen financing strategy, but also capacity building initiatives for local banks and financing entities. So it's really looking at a few of the gaps that were identified in the previous panel discussion, and looking at the way that you can plug those. Complementing these efforts, and the second of my 3 examples that I'll give you, is a recently approved project within the GEF 8 cycle. And this is looking at local value chains or supply chains for the development of EV batteries. So it's in turn building on a GEF 7 project that focused on e-mobility. This again is a $1 million project from the GEF, and then there's 6 or 7 million in co-financing. This is focusing on 3 outcomes to effectively try to make South Africa export competitive and able to serve the domestic market with regards to the production of these batteries. And so some of the work is on policy frameworks to effectively encourage investment. Some is on quality infrastructure, as we call it, and that includes working on a pilot testing facility with local universities to trial some of the most relevant technologies, and also enhanced national capacities and partnerships to this idea of ecosystems of innovation, which has been mentioned, and trying to foster the relevant connections for this whole of cycle approach. And then there's again technical assistance and looking at the assessment of manufacturing opportunities. So making sure that South Africa are targeting the appropriate sectors within the supply chain and then scaling it up appropriately. And I think this is a great example of this idea, as I say, of the just transition, where we are able to contribute within the overall industrial decarbonisation efforts, but at the same time creates hopefully a long-term industry in South Africa that can drive job creation and export competitiveness. So those are a couple of examples at the level of a country where this financing is trying to work to encourage the establishment and viability of new industries. And just as a final example then, I'll speak to one of the international initiatives that is also recently launched, and this is the Global Decarbonisation Investment Accelerator, which I'm just going to call the GDIA for the rest of this presentation. It's based on the premise that has been established throughout the last couple of days, actually, that if we're looking at the decarbonisation of heavy emitting sectors, and in this case, specifically in cement, there are various obstacles that are limiting the ability for us to deploy capital at scale. One of those is limited data. One is standards that are not fit to purpose for this new or slightly adjusted spec of technology, weak enabling environments more generally, and of course insufficient access to finance, and all of those have been mentioned at length. And so the idea of this GDIA is it's a platform that is providing the countries that will be involved with policy frameworks, technology pathways, and financing readiness. And the way that it will do that, just to give it an actual sense of the realities of this, firstly, on that point with data, so what the GDIA is looking to establish is a global analytical and policy framework. This means standardized methodologies for those involved via a digital data model and a monitoring tool. Asset level data monitoring, this was a point made in the last panel, so actually looking at your specific assets in questions, working out the technology foresight assessments to compare the viability of the product that you're looking to promote, and so on. So if that's at the asset level, then at the national level, we're working with the countries to develop their, in this case, cement sector roadmaps. And that means trying to work out how you establish supporting policy, technology assessments, the relevant financial architecture to build, again, this ecosystem for production. We're starting to apply these methodologies. This is at the early stage, and so there are 2 pilot countries, which are Kenya and Colombia. But if you're interested in, or if your countries are interested in exploring the possibilities to become involved with the GDIA, which I think is a really good example of how we can make progress in cement decarbonisation, then of course do reach out. But I think to conclude, these 3 examples, which I hope were intelligible, is trying to highlight the catalytic role of the financing of GEF. So it's able to set up, in these 3 examples, ways that you're able to make the investment pipeline stronger or more workable, and that's the ambition going forward. So I will leave it there, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot to both of you. So yeah, please, your applause. And I really want to encourage you to use the opportunity to ask questions. You heard about the upcoming new GEF cycle. You heard about interesting examples. So if there are any questions, I see someone standing up. So yes, please come forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the insightful
presentations. My question is around how the projects are executed once finance is granted and doing so in a way that's consistent with a lot of the points raised in the sessions over the last couple of days about just transitions and bringing communities along with us. So how do both Jeff and UNIDO work to ensure that local people are both bought into and brought into projects, and are these considerations a part of the project application process, and how, if so? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And we have one more question.
Thank you so much. My question is related to cross-sector learning, if I may. You shared really interesting perspectives around industrial decarbonisation, and I was wondering if you could share perspectives on what lessons from industrial decarbonisation can potentially help unlock concessional and blended finance for technologies such as offshore wind and enabling infrastructure in emerging markets in particular.
Thank you very much for these questions. So who would like to start? So Remy, over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much for these two questions. Very good questions, and those are questions we receive often. So on the first one, on the just transition aspect and how to bring communities along. So as you suggested, indeed, this is part of the standard application procedure, but it's also a project design priority. So I'd say there is a format and a substance aspect to my response. So in terms of format and process, we have a stakeholder engagement policy at the JEF, which makes it systematic across any project design to elaborate both during the project development, but also once it is submitted, how local communities are part of the process and are part of the project. So they should be engaged not only as beneficiaries, but also as key partners. So this is something that is across all of the sectors, not just climate change, biodiversity as well. And so this is checked during the project approval process. It's one of the criteria that we look for when we look at the design. But on top of that, in terms of the substance, in terms of the design, for climate change mitigation projects, this is also a priority because we know that local communities are the reason why projects are sustainable in the longer term. So our mandate is to support global environment benefits generation, so GHG emission reductions for climate change. But we know that these benefits are durable only if they are supported by social, economic, and economic benefits. Jobs being the key word here. So in JEF 9, this is an aspect that we are further strengthening in our eligibility criteria. So we received guidance from the COP 2 years ago to support countries to mainstream just transition principles in their NDCs, and also then to cascade down into projects and programs. So we'll be looking into how we can support countries, and this is of course country driven, so it's based on country request, but how to support them in including these just transition principles, not only in their planning, but also in their projects, and how to bring the questions of jobs, but also skills and workforce-related dimensions to the table of these projects. So I hope this helps to answer that first question. On the second one, I think it's a broader question about lessons learned from blended finance operations on the industrial decarbonization. So the JEF is 97% of JEF financing is grant. So blended finance for us is a small part of our portfolio, but it's been going on since our inception 30 years ago. And traditionally, climate change mitigation has been the main area on which we have provided support, mainly because those are the segments that are the most mature in terms of investment with loans or with credit guarantees, or we actually also provide any type of non-grant instruments. This includes also sustainably linked bonds, debt swaps. So it can be a variety of instruments. But the main partner that we work with for those blended finance investments are MDBs. And some of the lessons learned is that most of the time we have to link those investments with technical assistance components dedicated to building the pipeline and unlocking some of those barriers to making these investments viable. So this happens in parallel, and the typical blended finance structure that we have across every sector. So this is valid also for renewables. and also for key emerging sectors. We will always have the investment part of it, technical assistance, and this is the typical structure. But if we want to go to the next step, and that's what we're trying to do in GEF9, if we want to increase the leverage, we also have to have this sequence where the investment is preceded by technical assistance to unlock policy level and enabling environment level constraints. So this is where we are trying to find synergies in our portfolio with agencies such as UNIDO, but also UNDP or UNEP, working with countries at a policy and enabling environment level, and then blended finance, leveraging this preliminary work to upscale these investments and reach local financial institutions such as commercial bank. And we have a recent example on this on e-mobility, where a program was developed by UNEP across the world to work at this enabling environment level to develop roadmap and public-private partnerships on enhancing e-mobility deployment in a variety of countries. And then the African Development Bank just came in with a recently approved project to upscale this investment through loans. So it's a concessional loan facility that will be deployed in countries that have been already helped in the past on the policy side. And so this is one example we will try to replicate in GEF9, where we will try to have this sequence, or sometimes in parallel, depending on the context, where we first work at this enabling environment level to then being able to explore high-risk investments and trying to de-risk that with our concessional financing. I hope this helps to address your question.
Thanks, Remy. I'm just going to jump straight in following from your remarks, and I'll be brief on the two questions, really just to supplement what Remy has said. But firstly, to the remarks from the UK regarding the involvement of communities, consideration of local environmental dynamics and the like. And so naturally within UNIDO and the mandate, as I mentioned, of inclusive and sustainable industrial development, it's essential to the approach for our projects, whatever they are, that they are being designed in an appropriate way. That can take the form of two elements. So the first is within UNIDO has its own Just Energy Transition Unit, and what that does is try to promote specific projects or programs that are advancing particular benefits for groups that are potentially marginalized in society within the energy transition. An example is a recently concluded project in Turkey, which is related actually to the global clean tech innovation program that Remy mentioned, but a specific version of that which is targeting migrant communities within Turkey to ensure that their innovations and opportunities are being scaled up, including with support from UNIDO. But aside from specific projects, throughout all of our projects, including these ones in South Africa, there has to be due consideration and emphasis put on these local and just considerations. So, for example, an affiliated project in South Africa that relates to the development of a sustainable industrial park. The key element of the project is not only how you create additional clean energy for local communities, but also how you can best facilitate job creation for those local communities. And that goes alongside our natural processes of consultation and the like that has been raised throughout these convenings. And then just quickly on the final remark, I'm sorry I didn't catch the organizational country that was being represented, but I completely agree with the sentiment ultimately about the extent to which learnings can be transferred forward. We actually support the Belém Declaration on Global Green Industrialization, which Brazil launched with the support of UNIDO at COP30, and it's trying to place more of an overarching vision on the process of not just industrial decarbonization, but green industrial development more broadly, where you consider these elements around how you can foster production of wind turbines, or you can think about the grid and its holistic role within this overall process, which I think, at least in terms of structural terms on how we deal with this, will make it easier for learnings to transfer through and across.
Thanks a lot to both of you. Another round of applause. Thanks a lot for these insights and also for the questions. And with that, we proceed to our next input. It's again a virtual presentation, and joining us virtually is Sarthak Kurana, Associate Director at the Climate Policy Initiative, and he will be sharing experiences from India. So I wait for your image to appear. I hope you can hear us.
Hi, am I visible and audible?
Yes, we hear you and see you. So over to you.
Okay. Thanks. I'm waiting for the screen to come up.
Can you see the screen with your presentation? Sarthak?
I think there is somebody who's going to present it, right?
Oh.
Just give me a second. I'll try to. I do not have projection rights over here.
Okay, so you do not see the slides?
No, I can't see the slides.
Okay.
Yeah, now I can.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I am Sarthak Khurana. I work with an organization called Climate Policy Initiative. We are a global research and advisory organization. We have deep expertise in finance and policy, and our mission is to help governments, businesses, and financial institutions drive economic growth while we address climate change. So we want to build a sustainable, resilient, and inclusive global economy. And as a part of that, we have done a fair bit of work on the industrial decarbonization part of things. And I would like to share some of the work that we have done. So this is the slide that you're seeing right now is one of CPI's flagship products. This is the landscape of climate finance. And it tracks the global flow of capital towards different parts of the climate mitigation and adaptation work streams. And as we can see here, that industries which are a major emitter and yet the decarbonization funding significantly lags. It only comes up to around $26 billion globally, where the total funding that goes into climate finance is $1.9 trillion. Steel industry alone needs an estimated of $290 billion additionally investment by 2050 to reach the clean technologies goal, and this is by Mission Possible Partnerships. Next slide, please. Yeah. So then we come to the point of transition finance. Why do we need transition finance? So what typically happens is we created a bucket called green finance, which finances zero or near zero emission technologies that are aligned to the Paris Agreement. But a lot of the hard to abate sector, especially iron and steel sector, does not have commercially competitive Paris aligned technologies. And what that does is that while there are some technologies which can help reduce the emissions, but they are not completely zero or net zero. But because of the definition of green finance, the way it is structured, money does not flow towards these technologies. And the bottom line here being that the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. And therefore, we needed an alternative solution where transition finance comes in with a sunset clause and supports the transition of the technologies which are currently very high emitting to slightly lower emitting technologies, and eventually moving them towards the zero or near zero emission solutions. So to develop this piece, we have been working with a bunch of stakeholders. We worked with the industry group of iron and steel players. We did a bunch of literature review on the academic side of things, and we did a large amount of consultations. I'll come to the consultations towards the end of it. And so what we essentially came up with there are a bunch of things that need to fall into place for this to work. The first is the green industrial policy of the geography that we are looking at needs to align. The taxonomy and the criteria of should be eligible for transitional activities. There should be technology roadmaps. This cannot be perpetual. The finance emissions need a target setting for financial institutions. Financial instruments and mechanisms need to come up, and corporate transition plans need to come up with credibility assessment. So we have essentially worked on developing a financial instrument that can be tweaked to any geography in the world and can be implemented to decarbonize iron and steel sector. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So what is the challenge that the iron and steel sector typically faces, or the hard to abate industries face, in raising capital for setting up technologies that have limited or no emissions? So the first requirement is that these technologies and these assets require long-term capital, and very often that this long-term capital is not available, or is not available at the prices which can actually sustain this investment. Second, the risk perception is relatively high. Transitional technologies have not completely proven themselves yet, and a lot of financiers actually see this as a risk and do not want to invest or attach a higher premium. Thirdly, the policy landscape, the climate landscape keeps evolving, and new opportunities come up. There needs to be financial innovation, creation of instruments which can unlock capital for transition projects, and actually leverage the carbon revenue that is going to come out of these clean projects that come up. Next slide, please. Okay. So with that problem statement in our mind, we went ahead and started researching on what can solve what part of the problem. So essentially, we came to a three-piece solution. None of this is new. Putting it together is the novel idea. The zero coupon or deep discount bonds have existed for a very long period of time. What this does is it allows for capital to come in for a longer duration without the pressure of coupon upfront from the year one on the developer. So creating a solution that utilizes the deep discount bond structure or a zero coupon bond structure, at least in the initial period, is quite useful for these technologies, especially in the circumstance that they're not completely commercially competitive right now. This gives them a little bit of a headroom to maneuver while they find their competitiveness with the other conventional technologies. Second part of it is that the carbon mitigation that it creates, that should have a monetary value attached to it. The carbon credits are tradable in different markets. The different kinds of credits will go into different markets, but the problem is that the bondholder may not always want to hold the carbon credits that come with it. So either the developer has to monetize the carbon credits immediately to pay the bondholders, or an innovative structure needs to come up. So what we thought of was there is a strips bond structure where the coupon is separated from the principal, and they're both traded separately. So can the carbon coupon be separated and traded separately? The third part of the problem was that there needs to be a floor in terms of what the carbon revenue will be. And we took our learnings from IFC's forest bonds that were done a couple of years ago, and where there is a buyer of last resort. What it does for the buyer of last resort is it gives them assurance that they will be able to get carbon credits at a certain price point, and the upside can also be played in the market. I'll go to the exact structure as we move forward. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. So this is the ideation process that we underwent when we were developing this structure. The plain vanilla bond structure exists, but it doesn't work. A deep discount bond starts off very well, but it may not work completely for industries, especially when we're looking at carbon revenue. So we thought of getting a partial deep discount bond structure where in the initial years there is no coupon repayment, and coupon repayments can start after a moratorium period. Then when we add carbon revenue to it, what we thought that maybe the coupon repayment could be partially done in carbon, and that would help reduce the financial load the developer has to take on to actually develop the project and make it commercially viable. And the third part, the final part of it, is that when we separate the carbon and the carbon revenue and the coupon and the principal part of it, all three of them can be traded separately. And what that allows is to get the buyers who are most interested in that type of asset come in and price it. So there might be buyers in the market who only want to deal in the carbon credits, speculate on it, find value in a future point of it, of the time, develop derivatives on top of it. So all of that can be done once these are separated out, and the coupon holder will have the option to get paid either in the form of carbon or in cash, and they can split out the carbon and let the market take care of that. I'll explain the structure in the next slide, please. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the structure that we finally came up with for the partially deep discounted carbon strip bond. There is an iron and steel company which wants to invest in uh, making their output cleaner. It is not zero emission, but it's significantly cleaner, but it requires a significant amount of capex. So what it does is that it creates a transition project which generates carbon rights and carbon credits which can be utilized. Now, a bond subscriber can provide the initial capital to the iron and steel company, and post that, the bond subscriber can have two choices: that they would want their coupon in carbon credits, or they would want their coupon directly in cash. Um, so if the other players in this are the carbon market and the emission offset buyer, which is the buyer of last resort. If the bondholder wants the coupon in carbon credits, it would only be in a case where the carbon price is actually higher than what the coupon value would have been in that particular year. So what that does is that the coupon goes to the bond subscriber in the form of carbon credits, but not all the carbon credits that are generated go to the bond subscriber. Part of the carbon credits are reserved for the emission offset buyer because they have given a floor to this agreement where they would receive a minimum quantum of carbon credits even when the bond subscriber has chosen the carbon credits. So part of the payment to the bond subscriber would still be in dollars, while the emission offset buyer gets some of the carbon credits at a predetermined price, does not have to pay the market price for it. In the second scenario, where the carbon price is lesser than the coupon return that would have been generated, the bond subscriber will, in almost all probability, always choose to get the coupon in cash. In such a scenario, the floor price hedge against the price shocks would come into play. The emission offset buyer would end up taking all of the carbon credits at the predetermined price, providing the iron and steel company the coupon with which they can pay off the bondholder. Essentially, what this does is the emission offset buyer can actually use it to offset their own emissions, or maybe play it in the carbon market, whichever way they want. This is a freedom which will be determined by how the carbon markets in the respective geographies are built up. Some geographies will allow them to trade right away, some of them will have a holding period, some of them will have an obligatory mechanism. So all of those can be nuanced when this is developed. This has been discussed and peer reviewed and has been published in one of the recent publications that was done. Um, and we had a bunch of discussions. So all of this was not the pure product of our own thinking. We have a debt of gratitude towards the stakeholders who helped us design this. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we, as a part of this idea, we spoke to carbon market experts within India, US, Europe, Southeast Asia. So we had a bunch of discussions about how the voluntary markets will look at it, how the compliance markets will look at it. We ideated on a bunch of structures that might work. So finally, we had to leave it at a loose structure because the market where it actually is implemented will determine how it plays out. The second one was experts from multilaterals, especially because we wanted to understand how the forest bond structure was designed, and how the buyer of last resort or the offset buyer can be put in place, and what are the terms and conditions that would need to be put in place to guarantee that they have an upside in this entire thing. And finally, the proof of the pudding would be in the eating of it. And we went to the bond houses, financial institutions, and even the industry players. And we asked them that would such a structure be of interest to you? And there are perspectives around credit ratings, who would be the investors, what kind of a developer would want to do this, what would be the typical size of a developer who would want to do this. But essentially, at the end of the day, both the financial institutions and the industry players see this as a product with which they would want to work forward on. We are in discussions with a bunch of players. I cannot name them because of confidentiality, but hopefully we will see this implemented pretty soon. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks a lot for your input. A round of applause. So, are there any questions? Please make your way to the microphone if you would like to ask a question. Someone is standing up, so. And please say your name and affiliation.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Bernd Nordman from WWF. So thank you for the very interesting presentation of a concept. I actually want to comment on a specific detail, but I think it's relevant. I think you, at some point, you pointed, I think in your triangle, there was reference to something like the evolving climate governance landscape. So you're nodding, yes, so you. So I think this is a really, really important point when we are talking about climate finance. And also, of course, your perspective is kind of carbon crediting. But it's the issue of the baseline. So it's true that the climate policy is evolving. It's actually what we have all agreed in the Paris Agreement. That's a key feature of the Paris Agreement, that the NDCs step by step will develop. We will raise together ambition. And that, of course, means that the baseline for additionality moves kind of with every cycle. And I think it's important to acknowledge that a key kind of qualitative criteria of, let's say, crediting or financing is that it should be additional compared to the baselines. I'm kind of, I think we should develop every instrument for climate financing that is including the additionality element, which I think is very crucial. So we should adopt it to the fact that the NDCs change the baseline every 5 years. Would you like to perhaps comment on this, or would somebody else in the room like to comment on this point? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this comment. So, Sarthak, handing over to you for a brief answer and comment.
Yep. So absolutely and 100% agree with the point that has been made. Additionality has to be one of the most key pillars on how we move forward on climate finance. This becomes increasingly critical when we talk about transition finance, especially because unless the baseline is set properly and the baseline is revised in a timely manner, you will end up in a position where you will be generating too many credits, which will not have any value, and you will break the mechanism on a whole. So making sure that the baselining is done properly, making sure that every additional dollar that goes towards it pays towards additionality and not just pays for the status quo, and taking it forward in terms of transition finance, also having a sunset timeline, not just raising the baseline, but also giving an end date on when we would stop financing this technological solution, or when this instrument would no longer work for this kind of improvement. You would have to take it one step up to actually get this kind of financing for that. So that is my view on this. But thank you for the fantastic point. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So another round of applause for Sarthak Kurana. Thank you for joining us. And with that, we proceed to our next input, showcasing experiences from turning palm waste into power. And I welcome on stage Mr. Simon Beaumaraz, Head of Energy Planning and Modeling at the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. And online joining us, we have Mr. Dato Leong Kin Moon, President of the Malaysia Biomass Industries Confederation. So just checking in briefly, Dato Leong Kin Moon, if you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear. Yeah.
Perfect. We hear you. We don't see you yet, but I'm confident we will see you in a second. And I'm handing over to Simon Baumaraz.
Thank you, moderator, and good afternoon. I'm here with my colleague Dato on the screen. Dato, I will, at the end of my presentation, give you a prompt of questions, a good segue to your intervention.
Okay.
Today we are addressing lesson learned
Yes,
from a case study, turning palm waste into power. Sorry?
Dato, we hear some noise. I don't know if you can hear us well.
Yes, I think it didn't come from him.
Not from me, I mean the voice.
Okay, I'll try to fight the noise. Okay, so turning into our presentation, CPI, I think, addresses similar challenge we try to explore from a different angle. They show how the macro conditions can unlock industry decarbonization, particularly in a country like India, when energy demand is growing and the gap between ambition and the capital available become widen. Our case study, I think, asks a complementary question. What closed the financing gap when the macro condition may exist? But the individual project, the one we talked today, the whole day, the bankable project, still cannot get a financial close. When does a technology demonstration become commercial investments that a utility, a traditionally conservative stakeholder, will actually build? Malaysia is the case we want to present, and we try to answer the questions. Two projects. I need to turn the slides, probably. So we try to answer this question with two projects. One anchored by the national utility and one by an independent power producer. They advanced from trial burns to FEED, so the advanced design completion, with plan modification underway, targeting co-firing in the near future. But the more important question that we tried to observe in our analysis was what separates a demonstration that stays in the shelf to the one that becomes a credible, real investment in a country like Malaysia. And this is what we wanted to share. On the slide you see 65 million tons. That's the combined annual output of palm oil biomass waste from Malaysia and Indonesia. Those are felled trunks, empty fruit bunches, processing effluents. Left unmanaged, and as you know, those materials actually release methane at scale, with the roughly 25 times the emission, the global warming potential than CO2 over 20 years. The density of dry oil palm trunk wood is approximately 0.35 grams per cubic meter, too low to transport profitably to any conventional biomass to power facility. The waste exists because there was no economic pathway to be used. So this case study show that's how to bridge between a liability to a commercial prospect. And our case study analysis show also this. We wanted to look at the pathway toward completion. So we looked at, So our case study identified three conditions to that. First, three conditions. The first, that you need to name national champions with a clear mandate. And this was done with the National Transition Roadmap. We designated the national utility as a co-firing champions, not only a stakeholder, but the owner of the roadmap. Project development without an owner traditionally fails. Project development with one does not. Second, feedstock economics are traditionally difficult for bioenergy. And here, this was a feedstock without an alternative market. Palm oil waste in Malaysia had no alternative use at scale. Disposable cost effectively became a negative fuel cost. The plantation owner pays to have it removed, and the utility acquires it below market price to use it. So that structural advantage is not universal, we know, in different regions, but in markets where biomass has a fuel market, the economics become different. And third, we had vertical integration. So meaning that the utility ownership of the procurement through an internal fuel subsidiary remove the traditional passing risk from one party to another, the so-called third-party contract risk, and also remove the margin accumulated over different entities. So that simplified the lecture, the reading of a bank to the project as well. The technical barrier also here was particularly challenging. The potassium and chlorine compounds in raw EFB cause silicate glass formation at coal furnace temperature, so very high temperature, leading to slag accumulation, and that's translated into operational failure and increase of cost. The company behind that used trial and tested three-stage pre-treatment process: drying, size reduction, and decalcification that remove those obstacles at the demonstration facility. And this was a critical insight. EFB co-firing requires a pre-treatment supply chain, a quality monitoring system, and furnace operating protocols to be calibrated for this particular fuel, the palm oil waste. The transferable lesson for this example is not the actual pellet specification. It is the supply chain architecture from one place to another. And country can replicate that, not only because they want to do it, but also because they have to import that equipment to make it happen. So the technology worked. It was demonstrated at scale by the operator. The feedstock economics was shown in this study to be, let's say, structured. What is not universally solved is the financing architecture behind that bridge the early stage development when you're trying to fix an actual brick and mortar issue to the scaling and the construction risk that you have to take to reach operations. And this is a pattern we have documented in our study. Feed study completed, technology validated, and then the project waits for an instrument to be financed. So here the lesson was that we need targeted public co-funding at the right phase, absorbing this early stage risk that commercial capital, sorry to say, will not actually take. So this is not a subsidy per se. This is a de-risking mechanism in the phase where it has the highest leverage. So closing the financing gap is where multilateral institutions, we had them in the session before, can leverage and change outcomes at scale because of the enormous availability of biomass waste. So, to conclude and to pass to Dato on his experience in the country, we know that project development, especially for bioenergy, can be rough. Some project needs to go back to the review if something was not properly done, even at advanced development stage. Second, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam all generate palm oil waste at scale comparable to Malaysia. All have renewable energy policy frameworks, actually good ones. Not all have a utility willing to internalize fuel procurements, a waste stream, or have the contractual architecture for long-term fuel supply agreements. So Malaysia have advanced those projects from trial burns to the feed completion, and they modified the design to fit their particular national there. So Irina's role is to ask, and this is for you, Dato, the question before projects are proposed. What are the specific institutional conditions that enable commercial investments, and are those conditions present in the targeted context? And to close my intervention, this is actually a question applies to many renewable pathways. Whether the feedstock is actually palm waste, bioenergy, or ocean winds for offshore winds, the enabling conditions are specific, and identifying before committing capital is exactly what institutions, and we heard it just before, like Jeff, can add value there. So Dato, this is my prompt to you. Setting about what kind of the specific condition, institutional condition, enable those projects to happen. Over to you.
Thank you. Dato, I hope you can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do hear you.
Yes, okay. So, in this context, for any massive project in the context of, for example, biomass coal-firing, so we need to ascertain the feedstock availability, the assurance of the supply chain. Yeah, okay. I will give you additional dimension. In addition to what Simon had presented just now, yeah, because earlier on I've developed the National Biomass Action Plan as a consultant for Malaysia governments, and also I just completed another national plan on, we call it bioenergy clustering potential, which is more focusing on grid-connected biomass power plant. And currently I'm doing some job for the UK government and Malaysia governments on green finance mechanism. So I have the answers, for the question prompted by Simon. Okay, I will cover it in my subsequent presentation. Okay, I just give you a quick, overview. In the context of biomass industry, you have to look at two national plans. The first one is National Energy Transition Roadmap, and we have two major flagship initiatives related to biomass. The first one is exactly what Simon had presented, biomass coal firing, involving EFB, empty fruit branches, or biomass pellet, as one of the flagship bioenergy initiative. And the second one is actually to develop grid-connected biomass power plant under the feed-in tariff mechanism. So these are the two national initiatives under the National Energy Transition Roadmap, which is aligned with the National Biomass Action Plan, focusing on biomass coal firing as well. And if you look at the right-hand side info diagram, as you can see, in terms of quantity, oil palm biomass is actually the number one as the contributors in terms of quantity. Yeah, Malaysia actually generate close to 164 million tons oil palm biomass alone. So it's a huge quantity. Woody biomass and agricultural biomass in terms of quantity is less significant. Okay, next slide, please. So since oil palm biomass is the big brothers, so I show you another slide. You can see the actual quantity. These are the official statistics recognized by Malaysia government and released by Malaysia Palm Oil Board. And also I do some analysis on that. What I share with you is actually on a dry ton basis. Yeah. So if you can look at empty fruit branches, what have been presented by Arena just now. So we have close to 8 million tons per year on a dry ton basis. And this is actually generated from the palm oil mill. It is available on a daily basis. We also have others, biomass, which have been used as a green fuel like mesocarp fiber, palme, which is tapped for biogas project development, and we have palm kernel shell. 1/3 of the palm kernel shell have been exported to Japan. Yeah. And what we have a lot from the plantation is oil palm trunk and also oil palm frond, but it's underutilized. Okay, for biomass coal firing, for the purpose of improving oil palm industry circularity, conceptually, this is good. Yeah, because you do not need to build additional biomass power plant, and you can just tap into the existing infrastructure of the coal plant. Yeah, so conceptually, this is good, and we can utilize plenty of biomass generated from the palm oil mill and also from the plantation. Yeah, okay, next. Yeah, so if you compare, the calorific value, that's where we have some issues of financing mechanism. Yeah, okay. If normally, for biomass pellet, whether it's wood pellets or palm pellets, the calorific value we are just talking about in average, 4,000 kcal per kg, compared to conventional coal, which is about 5,500 as a baseline. So as a result, from Malaysia to ship to biomass coal firing using biomass pellet, made of wood pellets or palm pellet, the cost of procurement is relatively high. I could give one simple example. The CIF price for Malaysia to import coal from neighboring country, for example, Indonesia, the CIF price to Malaysia is about $100 in average. Yeah, this is based on Tenaga Nasional data, the latest data. Whereas our biomass pellet primarily is a wood pellet. Export to Japan, overall to the world, is about 137 tons. Yeah, so you do remember the biomass pellet, the CV is only about 4,000. But for coal fuel, it's about 5,005 minimum. So when we do the calculation, the mathematical calculation, when we shift to biomass pellet, the procurement cost will be at least 88% to 100% higher than coal procurement. So what is the funding mechanism for us to cover this? At the moment, the financing mechanism, it is still under review. Indicatively, we can talk about carbon pricing, green finance, branded finance, policy incentive. Yeah. Okay. So this another diagram, you can see the comparison in an objective manner. Yeah. So pellet is about 88% to 100% higher than, coal fuel. Yeah. So for Malaysian government to ship this and the utility company, we need to work out the carbon finance mechanism. Okay. And in the next slide, I'm going to take you through, our utility companies. Malakoff is the largest utility company in Malaysia. Is the largest independent power producer, IPP. Yeah. So they are the pioneer and the pilot company to champion biomass coal firing. And based on the testing, conducted, at the field, it is actually confirmed biomass coal firing, because by virtue of producing steam at a higher pressure and temperature, therefore achieving higher efficiency in power generation with a reduced consumption of fuel compared to ordinary smaller scale biomass power plant. So that's why technically, economically, it makes sense to use biomass for biomass coal firing at the coal plant rather than building new biomass power plant. But the issue is how to work out the funding mechanism for additional procurement cost for biomass pellet. Okay, next slide. Yeah. So fortunately, as I mentioned, we need additional financing mechanism to enable it. And yesterday, Malaysian government, we just launched the National Carbon Market Policy. So the National Carbon Market Policy will lay the foundation, for the establishment of the domestic emission trading scheme, which will be implemented by the new statutory body in Malaysia. We call it National Climate Change Authority, or ICLIM. Yeah, and that will introduce new mechanism on this climate finance or carbon finance. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the utility companies in Baden, Simon? Yes.
No, please conclude.
Yeah. So the utility company in Malaysia, as of now, we are still in the midst of formulating the new financing mechanism for the consideration of Ministry of Energy Transition. There have been few rounds of discussion, going on. We have yet to finalize, the agreeable formula. Okay.
Thank you, Dato. I think our joint presentation showed that actually the challenge to bridge are not traditionally technical. They are about institutional challenges, but also financing condition to move those projects from concept to actually a commercial operation date. So thank you very much. Over to you, moderator.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to both of you. So a warm round of applause, please. Very interesting example. So in light of time, I'm sort of looking around in the room if there is an urgent brief question. But as no one is approaching the microphone, I would say we proceed, and it's great to know you will be here over the next days, and we can approach you with questions on this very interesting hands-on example. So thanks a lot for joining us and for giving your input. And another round of applause, please.
Okay.
And with that, we are at our last case study for today. And we are going to hear about support from the Climate Technology Center and Network for the government of Pakistan. And for this, I welcome Tomoko Furusawa, head of the Office of UNEP Climate Technology Center and Network, CTCN, and the Partnership and Liaison Office, PALO. Also with us is Diana Alejandra Quesada Avila, Senior Officer at the Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI, and Mr. Usman Ali, technical expert on climate finance at the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination of Pakistan. So a warm round of applause, please. And I believe you are going to start. So you can just grab the mic.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Usman Ali from the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination, Pakistan. Today I'm here to talk about the CTCN's technical assistance that was provided to the Ministry of Climate Change to provide some bankable and viable projects for the government of Pakistan. So Pakistan's collaboration with the CTCN demonstrates how targeted technical assistance can move from climate ambitions from paper to practice. Through this support, Pakistan was able to operationalize key priorities under the NDCs by identifying actionable pathways, strengthening institutional coordination, and aligning technologies with national developmental needs. This was not merely an analytical exercise, rather it directly enabled the transition of NDCs goals into tangible and implementable actions. A key outcome of this engagement was the partnership of CTCNs and GGGI, which built on the CTCN's technical groundwork to develop investment-ready concept notes. Notably, this collaboration includes the design of Pakistan's National Biochar Accelerator Program, which is an essential step toward the mitigation activities in Pakistan, which is an innovative solution that simultaneously addresses climate mitigation, soil health, and rural livelihoods, while offering scalable opportunities for private sector engagements in Pakistan. However, as many developmental countries, including Pakistan, experiences the transition of concepts to implementation hinges on access to finance. While technical assistance is critical in shaping viable projects, there remains a clear need for targeting matchmaking platforms that can connect these investment-ready pipelines with financiers or carbon markets and developmental partners, which again is a key to all mitigation activities in developing countries. Addresses this bridge is essential in unlocking, scaling up, and accelerating impacts of global mitigation activities. Coming back to the CTCN's activities in Pakistan, the combined efforts and support of CTCN to GGGI has catalyzed a broader systematic shift in Pakistan's approach. While we understand that isolated intervention to activities towards a forward-looking programmatic models for sustainable development are more important to move towards a contextual mitigation efforts, a programmatic approach, a regional approach more specifically, is also essential to expedite global mitigation efforts. This initiative is fostering a pipeline of bankable solutions, enhancing institutional readiness, and embedding long-term climate resilience into national planning frameworks in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Usman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tomo Furusawa. I'm head of Partnership and Liaison Office of Climate Technology Center and Network, hosted by UNEP. Before I start, I would like to briefly explain you how CTCN was established. At the COP16 held in Cancun, Mexico in 2010, parties agreed to establish technology mechanism consisting of Technology Executive Committee, currently hosted by UNFCCC, as a policy arm, and a Climate Technology Center and Network as an implementation arm, and Green Climate Fund as financial mechanism. And from this decision, the CTCN was established in 2015, and currently we are hosted by UNEP, and our main counterparts are national designated entity. They are mostly sitting in Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Climate Change. And we have three key service areas. One is capacity building, and second, technical assistance project, and three, the post-impact generation, including knowledge sharing and matchmaking to the potential financier to scale up our TA. So in this presentation, I would like to show how CTCN and GGGI support led to innovative investment approaches and share key lessons learned in advancing mitigation action in industries in Pakistan. Pakistan has been facing significant inefficiencies in waste and water sectors due to climate change. And they were lacking bankable projects for climate finance, while high mitigation potentials in organic waste from methane emissions and agriculture residues and irrigation and flood systems. To address these challenges, CTCN supported a technical assistance project, a development of a national technology roadmap for NDC implementation, focusing on waste, methane mitigation, and water to improve efficiency and climate resilience. The project was for 2 years, for 2023 to 2024, with $250,000 US. The implementing partner was GGGI, and our counterpart was Ministry of Climate Change. As key outputs of this technical assistance project was a development of a national technology roadmap, sectoral technology assessments in waste and water, and 4 investment-ready concept notes for scaling up. 1, biochar production from agricultural residue. 2nd, AI-integrated water resource management systems. And 3rd, the climate-smart irrigation solutions. And lastly, methane mitigation strategy for organic waste. After the technical assistance project was completed, GGGI continued to build on these results through additional funding, including support from the Korean Green New Deal Fund. And currently, a national biochar accelerator program is under development. This builds directly on our technical assistance project implemented. And also, GGGI is engaging with National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority to establish a branded finance facility, which include a super energy service company, ESCO model, to scale up energy efficiency investments. This follow-up initiative demonstrates how early-stage TA can evolve into structured investment program for industrial decarbonization. As enabling factors, there was a strong government ownership by Ministry of Climate Change, and there was structured stakeholder coordination, and policy, technology, and finance were integrated throughout the process. Key lessons learned for scaling industrial mitigation are: linking sectoral technologies to finance is critical. Early development of bankable concept notes accelerates investment. And industrial mitigation opportunities in non-traditional sectors were explored and implemented. In this process, CTCN served as exploring the options to de-risk early-stage investments through the provision of technical assistance. And we connected the country and stakeholders with technology providers and financial partners. And we also supported the translating NDCs into implementable investment pipelines. CTCN would like to replicate this model to other developing countries and cross-sector industrial decarbonization pathways. CTCN will continue to support linking to innovative investment approaches because now it's mandated under the BELEM Technology Implementation Program adopted at the COP30 in November 2025. Under this decision, CTCN, in collaboration with Technology Executive Committee, will host a global in-session dialogues and regional dialogues and thematically align regional dialogues with the topic in Essential Dialogue starting in 2027. We will also continue support matchmaking and partnership building to advance climate technology implementation in developing countries in collaboration with multilateral development banks, other financing institutions, private sector, and philanthropic organizations. So CTCN is looking forward to continue working with you to advance climate mitigation actions. Now I give the floor to Diana, GGGI.
Thank you, Tomoko. So thanks to all of you who stay until the very, very end. I promise I will be very fast and that we save the best for last. So already feel free to stand up and shake yourself if you're very sleepy. I will do so at the end. But I would like to give you a little bit more details on what Tomoko, my colleague, already explained. So how are we actually leveraging or creating decarbonizing industries in Pakistan, and how we are transforming waste into value? So as Tomoko explained, our first idea was to identify the need through these NDC technology roadmaps. And we identified that biochar had a big potential in the country. So that it's already linked to the NDCs. But then translating NDCs into actual investment requires a lot more steps. So after that assessment, we actually developed the pre-feasibility assessments and assessed the readiness to scale up the market of biochar in the country. So we looked into the technical feasibility and the financial feasibility of biochar as a climate-smart solution. Then we realized, like, okay, there's a big financial potential. What is the next step? So we created the National Biochar Accelerator Program. And this is basically replicating what we have already done in the Philippines. And what it is, at very general terms, is that we are supporting the private sector, so pilots that are already in place, and we are supporting them to scale up at industrial scale. And we are linking it with carbon markets in order to have, or to be sustainable, financially sustainable. And we are linking all these again through supporting the Pakistan LT-LEDs. So looking into the long-term development planning of the country and how to ensure that biochar as a solution, it's actually stated within the LT-LEDs of the country. So, So for the pre-feasibility study, in order to make it the most useful for bankable project, we actually focus these studies on carbon markets and climate finance opportunities within the waste agricultural sector. We try to integrate all the available interventions and how to expand the technical feasibility into actual projects on the ground. And we basically try to already establish linkage with the key stakeholders in the country. So all the pre-feasibility studies, as Tomoko mentioned, were financed by the Korean Green New Deal Trust, by the Ministry of Economy and Finance from Korea. And if you're wondering how much money was that, it was around $180,000 for all the pre-feasibility studies. So we did the market assessment, we looked into the feedstock available, the legal and regulatory environment, and identified the stakeholders. Then we looked into the actual potential and the market assessment of the country. Because we don't have enough time, I will not go into all the numbers of this market potential, but we realized that we could make this at scale. And that leads us to the National Biochar Accelerator Program. And here we actually make a business case for investments. and for us to reach out to private sector investors. We looked into the CapEx and OpEx of a different plant, and we benchmark against the plants that we had already supported in the Philippines. We looked into the two basically streams of finance, which is basically selling the biochar and the byproducts, bio-oil and syngas, and of course the carbon markets. So how many carbon credits we would generate annually, by how much we will be able to sell them. And combined, a single facility would generate around $800,000 or $1.15 million annually. Those are our estimations. In addition to actually looking into the financial model, we also looked into how to expand the biochar facilities at regional scale, either through capacity building or knowledge sharing or policy initiatives or other de-risking initiatives. So that's all from my side at very general stage. So yeah, I pass on the word again to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all three of you for this input, and a warm round of applause for you for keeping it interesting until the very end. So in the light of time, I would also say that you can be approached for questions after and in the days to come. And yeah, a warm thank you for presenting your work here. And with that, the session has come to an end. And for closing, I would like to ask our esteemed co-chairs, Ms. Angela Kalauge and Gao Jiang, on stage to close the session.
So thank you so much, especially to Samira Hankman for guiding us through these 6 case studies. I think from in our host country, Republic of Korea, and also in this Asia Pacific region, as well as in India, in Sweden. I think we have quite a good variety of these case studies, and also, especially, I think some of them also mentioned that we have learned the previous experiences and borrow these experiences to the current project. I think this is the reason why we have these case studies, to show that a lot of the experiences are replicable, that could be applied to some other countries. But of course, as we have discussed in these 2 days, have to adapt to the different national circumstances. I think this is very important. And also through these case studies, we heard that how we can do it step by step to turn these plans into action, to the investment and to profit. I think this is something we learned from the case studies. Thank you very much for guiding us through. And of course, thank you everyone for your participation in this investment-focused event today. And please join me in giving a big round of applause to thank all the panelists, our moderators, and our experts, speakers of these case studies sessions, as well as previous IFE sensitive sessions. And tomorrow we will begin the pitch-up session, which is very exciting thing. I think this pitch-up is a creation of the global, of the mitigation work program. Since I think the 2nd year, and we continue this process, we will see a lot of cases and projects in the pitch-up. And the session is an open event to Climate Week participants, not limited to those who are registered for the mitigation work program event. And this session will start at 9 o'clock in the morning in this conference hall. And with that, I would like to wish you a good evening and a good dinner, good sleep, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.